The measure of confidence with which I have spoken of essence forsakes me when I approach existence. Logic, grammar, and poetry are free. No alien fact, no vociferation can prevent intuition from beholding what it actually beholds. The public censor has indeed some rights over the persons in whom intuition arises, and may condemn their habit of mind if he thinks that it comports idleness or the disruption of happy national conventions. But in this instance, fortune having relegated me, like the gods of Epicurus, to the interstices of the worlds, I may escape that censure or disregard it. Who knows? Perhaps some kindred spirit may tell me that I have chosen the better part. In any case, I deny nothing and prejudge nothing concerning the intuitions of others. If I cultivate my own with a certain ardor, it is only as any man cultivates his language and tastes. If his mind is at all liberal, and I am confident no god or man will be justly angry with me for browsing so innocently in my own pasture. But when the active impulse of curiosity and dogmatism asserts itself in its turn, as it must in the most contemplative mind, and I ask myself what dark objects or forces have created or are threatening my contemplation, then indeed I am at a loss. And as in positing such natural agencies at all, I assume that they are objects obligatory to every other mind with which I can communicate. I bind myself to make my opinions conformable with their reports, and my reports agreeable to their experience. Of course, the belief that I can communicate with other minds, and that the reports reaching me signify an experience of theirs over and above my own, is a part of this extraordinary compulsory assumption which I make in living. The assumption that I am surrounded by a natural world, peopled by creatures in whom intuition is as rife as in myself, and as all my concern in perception and action turns on what those external things may do, so half my interest in my own thoughts turns on what other people may be thinking. It is not the task of natural philosophy to justify this assumption, which indeed can never be justified. Its task after making that assumption is to carry it out consistently and honestly, so as to arrive, if possible, at a conception of nature by which the faith involved in action may be enlightened and guided. Such a description of nature, if it were ever completed in outline, would come round full circle, and in its account of animals it would report how they came to have intuitions, among them this natural philosophy, and to use them in the description of the world which actually surrounded them. The whole field of action and of facts would then be embraced in a single view, summary and symbolic, but comprehensive. The dream of the natural philosopher would be to describe the world from its beginning, if it had a beginning, tracing all its transformations, and he would like to do this analytically, not pictorially, that is, not in the sensuous language of some local observer composing a private perspective, but in terms of the ultimate elements, if there are ultimate elements, concerned in the actual evolution of things. Out of those elements, he would conceive each observer and his perspective arising, and of course varying from moment to moment. Even if the natural philosopher were an idealist, and admitted only observing spirits and their perspectives, he would endeavor to trace the evolution of these intuitions, which would be his atoms, in their universal order and march, by no means contenting himself with one intuition and one perspective, for if he did so, his idealism, like that of some philosophies of history, would not be a system of physics or of logic, but a literary entertainment, the lyrical echo of many verbal reports in a romantic imagination. This echo might be interesting in itself, but it would remain only an incident in the natural world which indeed it presupposed, but which it deliberately ignored. So that when the idealist became a man again in the world of action, and began to live, as he must, by animal faith, his philosophy would entirely forsake him. Yet it is in the service of this animal faith that philosophy exists, when it is science and wisdom. Indeed, a theoretical refusal to trust natural philosophy cannot absolve the most skeptical of us from framing one and from living by it. I must conceive a surrounding world, even if in reflection I say to myself at every step, illusion, illusion. It then becomes almost as interesting to know what sort of illusions must accompany me through life as it would be to imagine what sort of world I really live in. Indeed, if all spurious substitutes for natural philosophy were discarded, spurious because irrelevant to the animal faith which alone posits existence, those two positions might coincide. Since the picture of the natural world framed by common sense and science, while framed with the greatest care, would be admittedly only a picture, and belief in the existence of that world, though assumed without wobbling, would be admittedly but an article of inevitable faith. Non-scientific beliefs about existence, whether inspired by religious feeling, reasoning, or fancy, are alternatives to the current natural philosophy or extensions of it. Nobody would believe in his ideas if he had not an initial propensity to believe in things, as if his ideas described them. Dogmatic religions are assertions about the nature of the universe. What is called supernatural is only ultramundane, an extension of this world on its own plane, and a recognition of forces ruling over it not reckoned with in vulgar commerce. The assertions made by such religious faith, if not superstitious errors, are ultimate truths of natural philosophy, which intuition or revelation has supplied in advance of experiment. But if the assertions are true at all, experiment might one day confirm them. Thus, Christian orthodoxy maintains that men will carry their memories and their bodies with them into hell or heaven. Theology is the natural philosophy of that larger world which religion posits as truly existing. It therefore has precise implications in politics and science. The absence of such implications and commitments, far from showing that religion has become spiritual, proves it a sham. It is no longer a manly hypothesis, honestly made about the world confronted in action. No doubt there is an inner fountain of religious feeling which a person, accepting his theology on hearsay, might wholly lack. But it was religious instinct of some kind that originally prompted those hypotheses about the hidden nature of things. And if this instinct is lacking, those hypotheses will soon be discarded. On the other hand, religious feeling may not always require ultra-mundane extensions of the natural world. It may find a sufficient object and sanction in the course of earthly history and domestic life, as was the case at bottom with Jewish and Protestant righteousness. Politics and science dictated by religious faith will then coincide with those recommended by worldly wisdom. Religious feeling may take still other forms. For instance, it may smile mystically at action and belief altogether, retreating into the invisible sanctuary of the spirit, or floating incredulously amid music and dreams. But mysticism, whether austere or voluptuous, since it regards the absolute, ceases to regard existence, which, by definition, is relative, since it consists in having external relations. Positive and virile minds may find indulgence in such mysticism irreligious, because their earnestness is directed upon alleged facts, in this world or in another, facts essentially relevant to action and policy and open to natural philosophy. Much restraint and some disillusion may enable a man to entertain ideas without believing them to describe any matter of fact. Such ideas will be avowedly mere terms of grammar, logic, or fancy, to be discarded, or at least discounted, on approaching a serious natural philosophy. They may still be indispensable as a medium, as some language is indispensable to science, but they will be optional and interchangeable, as the scientific part of a book of science, which is never the whole of it, is perfectly translatable from one language into another. This is not to say that the medium of intuition, even in natural philosophy, is indifferent in itself. Nothing is dearer to a man or a nation than congenial modes of expression. I'd rather be silent than use some people's language. I'd rather die than think as some people think. But it is the quality of life that is concerned here, not the truth of ideas. To attempt to impose such modes of intuition or expression as if they were obligatory tenets is metaphysics, a projection of the constraints or the creations of thought into the realm of matter. The authority of intuition would be entire if it kept to the definition of essences and of their essential relations. But when zeal intervenes, and we profess to find our favorite dialectic in things, we are betrayed into disrespect for nature and are inflating our egotism into cosmic proportions. At best, the metaphysician has given a useful hint to the naturalist. He has supplied categories which may be convenient or even indispensable for expressing the ways of nature in human discourse. The palmary instance of this is mathematics, which, long after having ceased to be empirical and become dialectical, still continues to serve for construction, even for prophecy, in the material sphere. Yet the symbols employed grow more abstruse and tenuous as they grow more exact, so that people are little tempted to substitute the notation for the thing denoted, and they thus escape metaphysics. When the experience interpreted is spiritual or passionate, the categories used are, as in religion and poetry, clearly mythological. Yet they are not without a real, though indirect, object in the realm of matter. This object is the psyche, with all those profound currents in her life which create the passions and create the spirit which expresses the passions, yet which in expressing them is so entangled that it often comes to regard them as its enemies. Those psychic currents, being dynamic, are material, but they are hidden from the eye of spirit, which alone is spiritual, by layer upon layer of vague sensation, rhetoric, and imagery. Belief, in its very soul, is belief about nature. It is animal faith. To entangle belief in anything non-natural or avowedly tangential to action would be to cheat at the game. Honest speculative belief is always speculative physics, but its terms are inevitably the essences present to intuition, and the very faith which, in the presence of these essences, posits existing things, drags something of the given apparition into the presumed substance of the thing revealed. The theophany humanizes the God. In correcting this illusion, and in discarding one mythical or metaphysical image after another, science must still retain some symbol for the overpowering reality of the world. This reality is not that symbol itself, nor a collection of such symbols. If we cling to these, we shall never quit the realm of essence. Nor am I sure that the most learned symbols are the least deceptive. If any human ideas must be idolatized, I should almost prefer those of the senses and of the poets. Yet it would be ignominious for a philosopher voluntarily to succumb to illusion at all, when the artificiality and relativity of all human views, especially of learned and beautiful systems, is so patent to reflection. Yet views we must have, none the worse, surely, if they are beautiful and learned, so that the natural philosopher is driven to a deeper question, to which I mean to devote this book. How much, when cleared as far as possible of idolatry, can sense or science reveal concerning the dark engine of nature? In what measure do they truly enlighten animal faith? In broaching this question, I am not concerned with repeating, correcting, or forecasting the description which men of science may give of the world. I accept gladly any picture of nature honestly drawn by them, as I accept gladly any picture drawn by my own senses. Different circumstances or different faculties would certainly have produced different pictures. From Genesis to Thales, to Ptolemy, to Copernicus, to Newton, and to Einstein, the landscape has pleasantly varied, and it may yet open other vistas. These variations and prospects show the plasticity of human thought, for it is not the facts that have much varied, nor the material station of man, nor his senses and destiny. The incubus of existence remains exactly the same. Is it merely imagination that has become more labored, but no less fantastic? Or has the path of destiny been really cleared and the forces that control destiny been better understood? Within what limits does any description of nature, picturesque or scientific, retain its relevance to animal faith and its validity as knowledge of fact? And at what point does it become pure speculation and metaphor? That is the only question which I shall endeavor to answer. My survey of the realm of matter will accordingly be merely transcendental and made from the point of view of a skeptic and a moralist criticizing the claims of experience and science to be true knowledge. By transcendental reflection, I understand reversion in the presence of any object or affirmation to the immediate experience which discloses that object or prompts that affirmation. Transcendental reflection is a challenge to all dogmatism, a demand for radical evidence. It therefore tends to disallow substance and, when it is thorough, even to disallow existence. Nothing is ultimately left except the passing appearance or the appearance of something passing. How then, if transcendental reflection disallows substance, can it lead me to distinguish the properties of substance? In skepticism and animal faith, I have considered the transcendental motives which oblige me to believe in substance. The belief must always remain an assumption, but one without which an active and intelligent creature cannot honestly act or think. Transcendentalism has two phases or movements, the skeptical one retreating to the immediate, and the assertive one by which objects of belief are defined and marshaled, of such a character and in such an order as intelligent action demands. The enterprise of life is precarious, and to the skeptic it must seem an adventure in the dark, without origins or environment or results. Yet this flying life, by its forward energy, breeds from within certain postulates of sanity, certain conceptions of the conditions which might surround it and lend it a meaning, so that its own continuance and fortunes may be conceived systematically and affirmed with confidence. Thus, the faith that posits and describes a world is just as transcendental as the criticism which reduces that world to an appearance or a fiction. If so many transcendental philosophers stop at the negative pole, this arrest is not a sign of profundity in them, but of weakness. It is by boldly believing what transcendental necessity prompts any hunting animal to believe that I separate myself from that arrested idealism and proceed to inquire what existence is, what substance is, and what motions are involved in the chase. In the chase, for those who follow it, the intensity of experience is not like the intensity, limitless if you will, of contemplating pure being, immutable, equable, and complete. The hunter and the hunted believe in something ambushed and imminent. Present images are little to them but signs for coming events. Things are getting thick, agents are coming together or disappearing, they are killing and dying. The assurance of this sort of being is assurance of existence, and the belief in this sort of agent is belief in substance. If this belief and assurance are not illusions, which the acting animal cannot admit them to be, several properties must belong to substances and to the world they compose. These properties I may distinguish in reflection and call by philosophical names, somewhat as follows.